In the 1960s, a policy was established that would affect the lives of Indigenous children across the country for the rest of their lives. It is known as the Sixties Scoop. Thousands of Indigenous children were taken from their families and villages by the government in coordination with child welfare organizations. Poverty, cultural misconceptions, or just the notion that Indigenous families could not offer proper care were among the reasons that were given. Children as young as infants were ripped apart from their homes, culture, and identities. Many of these children were placed in non-native foster care or adopted by non-native households. The goal was to assimilate them, to remove their Indigenous identities and culture from their lives.
We feel really alone, right? Because we don't really feel like we fit in with our biological family. We don't really fit in with our adoptive family, so we're kind of caught between both because we have this internalized thing where we grew up white, so our worldview is very different. So we struggle with like, where do we fit in? And one of my things was like, will people know that I'm not Native? Even though I look Native, I always forget. I would forget that I was Native. So it's been a long healing journey for a lot of us to get to the point where we're like okay to just be an adoptee, you know, and then find others like us. It's taken our whole lives to get to this point.
There's no words to describe that kind of harm to a nation of Indigenous people. There's no words for that.
The impact was strong and long-lasting. The loss of language, culture, and familial relationship produced a void that resonated down through time, affecting not just the Scoop survivors, but the future generations as well. Families were torn up, communities were destroyed, and cultural alienation developed. The trauma of the 60s Scoop showed itself in cycles of addiction, mental health problems, and a sense of separation that persists to this day. A confrontation began when the truth became clear. In recent years, Manitoba has acknowledged the injustice of the 60s Scoop and apologized to individuals who were harmed. Recognizing the trauma inflicted on Indigenous families inside its borders, the provincial administration made a step towards healing.
Today, as Premier, I would like to apologize on behalf of the province of Manitoba for the 60s Scoop, the practice of removing First Nation, Métis, and Inuit children from their families and placing them for adoption in non-Indigenous homes, sometimes far from their home community, and for the losses of culture and identity to the children and their families and communities. It was a practice that has left intergenerational scars and cultural loss. With these words of apology and regret, I hope that all Canadians will join me in recognizing this historic injustice.
However, formal apologies from the federal government is still pending. The road to national reconciliation is still unfinished, leaving a critical chapter in Canadian history unanswered. Although steps towards reconciliation have been achieved, the scars remain deep, and healing is an ongoing endeavor. Indigenous peoples have joined forces to restore their culture, language, and traditions. Language revitalization projects, cultural rituals, and community support efforts are assisting in the reconstruction of what has been lost. The survivors and their communities' resilience is a monument to the strength of the human spirit. The legacy of the 60s Scoop continues today in the experiences of those who lived through it, but it also lives on in the desire of Indigenous children to reclaim their heritage and construct a future based on resilience and pride.
The 60s Scoop left a horrible scar on Canadian history, but it is also a story of survival, perseverance, and the unyielding spirit of a community determined to heal and regain what has been taken away from them.